I am a member of some of the same organizations as Gina. I'm a member of the Massachusetts Council on Family Mediation. I'm also a member of the Financial Planning Association. And with David, who is going to talk next, I'm also associated with Vesta Divorce. So I look forward to more questions. Shai.
And David.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending today. My name is David Kellem, and I am a family law attorney and mediator. I've been a family law attorney for somewhat over 30 years at this point, and a mediator for 17. I used to litigate a lot of divorce cases, meaning fight them out in court, and I have kind of morphed my practice into a settlement-based, client-centered approach. Most divorce cases in court always settle. They're always almost never decided by a judge. My feeling is, and I know that's the feeling of all the other panelists, is let's talk about settlement and resolving things early in the case and get you moving forward with your life. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And we're going to go ahead and jump into the questions. I am going to reiterate that if any of our attendees have any questions, you can drop them in the Q&A box at the bottom if you're on the Zoom application. You can also utilize the chat, but just keep in mind that the chat is not anonymous as a Q&A would be. So our first question is going to be, what specific vantage points do each of you bring to potential clients when considering a divorce? I know that we have a lawyer, we have a psychologist, and we have a financial planner. So what do each of your specific backgrounds kind of bring to the process? Does anybody want to go first?
Sure. I'm going to nominate Gina to go first.
Oh, you're going to nominate Gina, okay. I think I'm glad to be nominated because in my role as a psychologist and mental health professional, sometimes I have the pre-role. And the pre-role is really working with couples when they're thinking about divorce to think through, have you done couples therapy? Are there other options open to you? Do you need some more time to really pause? Because this is a huge moment to decide whether or not you are going to go through a process that's going to alter your family forever. But that said, if it really is the right thing to do, I work with people to help them think through which process is going to be best for me. Will it be mediation, where you are working with one mediator and your spouse? Will it be something like collaborative law, where everybody has their own attorney and they have a collaborative law coach like myself helping with the emotional and facilitation issues, and also a financial planner that is also consulting on the process? Or is this a case that really feels like it needs the courts and requires litigation? So I help people walk around their choices. I help them to think through, how will they tell their children if they have children? How will they co-parent together? All these different pieces that aren't just about a divorce settlement, but are about really altering and changing your life. And then the final piece, which I value really deeply, is that I work with attorneys and financial planners together to help ensure that the needs, interests, and goals of the clients are really being attended to, so that at the end of the process, they can still work together, still talk to each other, and move forward in their lives in a positive way.
Thank you, Gina. Did you guys have any other additions, David and Chris?
So I think what Gina says is very important, actually. It's people often don't associate the kinds of things that Gina do with the divorce process, because when you start looking for, when you start thinking about divorce and you go to Google and you start typing divorce, what comes next is usually lawyer. And what should come up first is Gina, right? Because it is a very human process, and it is a very difficult process, and this is where Gina and people like her help the most. Right? So when it comes to the financial issues, these are the other, how to say that, underrated aspects of divorce, right? So financial people like myself help the lawyers and the therapists and the coaches and the mediators and the clients, of course, to put together the financial aspect of the divorce. When it comes right down to it, there are three questions that someone who's going through divorce would need to answer. The first one is, where are you financially today, right? And as simple as it sounds, a lot of people are not quite sure. There are a lot of people who are not quite sure how much money they make, for instance, or how much money they spend, or in fact, how much they have, right? And, or how much they owe, for that matter, right? And getting these things together is a first step. It's a step that your lawyer or mediator will ask you for anyway. And it's something that you should know. Right? The second question that you would want to answer is that of, where are you going to be at divorce, right? And so after the divorce, clearly your income and spending pattern will be different. You will have different assets than you have now, and you'll have different debt that you have now. And so it's important to understand where you're going to be so you can understand how to proceed from point A to point B, so to speak. And the third thing that you would want to know when you divorce is, where are you going to be financially 10 or 15 years down the road? And that's important because that's really the mark of a financially successful divorce. And no one wants to be broke after divorce, and no one wants to be broke 10 or 15 years after the divorce, right? You all want to have some assets, some income, and to have a happy life afterwards, right? So these three questions are the three main questions that financial planners with a divorce specialty will help answer for you. Moving on to David.
Thank you. So as a legal professional in divorce, I like to work as a team with other professionals. And there are three needs that almost every person going through divorce has. They need a legal professional to help them through the legal part of their situation. They need a therapist or a divorce coach or a psychologist to help them get through the emotional piece of what they're going through. People in divorce emotions are astoundingly complicated and robust, and they interfere with good decision making. And so getting through having a therapy professional to work with your attorney, to work with you, to help you kind of calm the fires and think through the process is really helpful to an attorney. And the third component of that everyone needs is a financial professional, because truthfully, most lawyers and most mediators are not financial experts, yet clients expect their attorneys to be able to solve their emotional issues, fight their emotional battles, figure out their financial presence and futures, and give them good legal advice and advocate for them. It takes a team, and that's why the three of us are here together. I wanted to tell you about one important thing that I think every person going through divorce needs in their attorney or mediator. They need someone who can educate them. They need someone that is client-centered and is willing to teach them about all the issues that need to get decided in their process, and to help the client, the person going through divorce, understand what is happening, what's happening on a legal level, what's happening on a process level, what is the law, what are the decisions that I have to make. Because if your legal professional can help you get out of the fog and make you feel less like a ping pong ball being battered back and forth, then you're going to come out through the process as healthy as possible, and you're going to make the best financial and family decisions possible as well.
Thank you, David. I am going to kind of take stock of who's in the audience. We're going to pop up a little poll here. And while you guys, my attendees, are answering our poll, I have a question that came up in the question and answer box. And it says, there was a lot of talk when all of this COVID, I'm guessing, started that there would be an increase in divorce, and recently I've seen more discussion on that, and that the numbers are proving it. What about the pandemic led people to know immediately that an increase of divorces would occur?
I think that one is for Gina.
Yeah, I have a theory as well. So.
You have a theory? Yeah. I'm curious, David, say your theory first and I will add.
Well, I think my theory is very practical. People who have not been getting along for quite some time are cooped up together, in the same home, maybe unemployed. Their financial pressures are mounting. Their interpersonal pressures are mounting, and they're stuck. They're stuck together. And so I think the expectation, at least from the legal community, was that that people would be in a holding pattern. Maybe couples that were on the edge might blow up eventually, and also that people that wanted to move forward with divorce and were just unable to do so because of the courts being closed and the needs of children, for children being home. We're going to basically tread water for a while and then dive, and I think that's what we're starting to see process-wise.
Right. And I agree with all of what David said. I think what is very complicated is that everybody is under stress. There is nobody now, whether it's the professionals or the people at home, that aren't feeling the results of COVID and navigating that. And so sometimes when something feels horrible, you just think, okay, how can I instantly fix this? Okay, it might be a divorce. And so again, part of my role is really trying to help people figure out what's COVID, what are your other options in your life, and not just turning to the divorce route. And I know we're hearing the most about the increase in divorce and other issues, but I think there are also families that are surprising themselves that as they're slowing down and they don't have to rush and drive and get everybody to a zillion different activities, that some people are actually feeling more connected, remembering some of the things they valued about being with each other and looking at each other with fresh eyes too. So I know we hear a lot about the silver linings part of COVID, but I think there's been a piece of that too. And we don't hear about that piece as much, but I always like to add that in. We're talking about divorce, but we're talking about divorce as a choice and thinking about what your other choices might be too.
I've actually seen some clients who were the primary wage earner and not the primary caretaker of children, suddenly finding themselves in the role of caring for children, homeschooling children, and they're loving it. I am really thrilled to see, I can think of a number of my cases where that person in the family is now taking a more active role with child rearing and child care responsibilities. They're still getting divorced, but they're thinking about it a little differently now, what their role is going to be going forward.
Okay.
You're muted, Shai.
I was trying to show the results, and it looks like, oh, well, our audience is re-answering it. So I'll be showing the results of the poll in just a second. We had a good chunk of folks that were currently going through a divorce process but didn't file. And I have about 20% of the audience that says I'm currently going through the divorce process. So the results are a little messed up, but
So
here we go.
Oh, there we go. None of the above. That's an interesting choice.
I'm wondering if
Interesting.
maybe some of those folks are just listening to see if they can bring that information back somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's what's going on in our audience.
If they should
Well,
make the
I have-
decision
I
to
have-
move forward.
I wanted to mention another aspect of COVID that I think has been a real positive for families going through divorce. And that is that the courts have been closed. And what that has meant, and so most of the courts are back in operation. They're more efficient now than they used to be. They're doing a lot of hearings remotely by Zoom. and a lot less time is being wasted and a lot more attention is being given to individual cases. But that's just resuming. So what's had to happen in the past 5 months is that people have to talk to each other. And that means lawyers had to talk to each other. And they had to settle cases. So lawyers who had cases in the initial stages and normally were busy ramping up litigation were finding themselves needing to ramp up resolution because they couldn't promise their clients when they would be heard by a judge, if they would be heard by a judge, and how and when their case would get resolved. It's been very fascinating. It's been good for the collaborative law industry. It's been good for mediators, and it's been good for attorneys who are primarily litigators realizing the value of communication, of talking, and of settling earlier on in the case.
You know, I'm wondering, since so many people don't fit any of the categories, if they might be other professionals, attorneys, mental health professionals, financial professionals who are listening too. And maybe this is a good moment to just describe what collaborative law is, since it involves all of our professions. And David and Chris, please add in that collaborative law is a process where both attorneys sign an agreement that they will not go to court, they won't litigate, they will work with you to solve it within this collaborative process. And if it breaks down, you need to begin with another attorney. And that really begins to have a feeling to it of the attorneys really working together with the clients to trying to resolve things. And then there's a mental health professional like myself who serves as a coach and a facilitator and really digs into the needs, interests, and goals of each client and what are the hot buttons. And then the financial professional who really digs into the financial aspects of the case. And both the financial professional and the mental health professional speak directly to the attorneys about everything they learn so that the whole team is on the same page and the clients have the benefit of that working for them. So if there's an issue like David was describing that seems like it's a straightforward legal issue, but really it has tremendous symbolic meaning to the clients or a client, or it has great financial meaning to one of the clients, then we understand all these pieces. And even though it sounds like a lot of professionals, things can actually be resolved more quickly and more respectfully. So that's what the collaborative law process means. And for professionals like myself and David and Chris, we never would have met each other, except that now we are learning the value of each other's professions. And whether it's a collaborative case or I consult to David or Chris on a case, or I have people that I send to David or send to Chris, it's richer for the clients and it's richer for us as professionals. Anything you guys might add to that? I just thought it's a good moment for people to understand that process because so many don't know about collaborative law.
I mean, I think collaborative law is very different, if you will. It's not what you see on TV about lawyers. It's completely the opposite, actually. And where it adds additional value for people who are getting divorced is that the collaborative law process brings in professionals other than lawyers like Gina and myself to work with all of the team and come to a better conclusion. And it is, when it works really well in terms of achieving the desired result, which is to get a fair settlement out of that.
When we talk about doing divorce a better way, we're talking about better for who? Better for the client, better for the person going through divorce, better for the family. And what that means is less stress, less cost, faster resolution. There are a number of processes. Collaborative law is a process that promotes those three things, client-centered. There are other ways, there are other legal processes that do that as well. And one is mediation. And in mediation, both spouses work with a neutral mediator to learn about what the issues are they have to resolve in their case, to understand them, to figure out the finances, and to discuss and negotiate options and decisions. in mediation, very often a financial professional, a neutral, is brought in, and also a therapy or a coach, a communication coach can also be brought in or used as an adjunct. But that process can also be used by lawyers. If each party wants to have a lawyer represent them in their case, and many do because they don't feel comfortable speaking for themselves, they don't feel comfortable about having sufficient knowledge about the law or about their finances, and they want an advocate, that's great. But the lawyers don't have to come out with gloves off fighting to have a successful outcome that serves their individual clients. And many lawyers, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to say that the responsible divorce lawyers out there who are litigators are taking that approach. And they are, so you can find a legal process that is very beneficial to you and your family, that doesn't have to involve a real court battle like a War of the Roses or Marriage Story, or the horror stories that you hear. And you can win. A lot of people want to win in divorce. What that means is something different for everyone else. But I think the three of us would suggest that winning is getting through your divorce and moving on with your life with as little trauma to your family, emotionally, financially, as possible.
I agree. I think the thing I would add is when I'm speaking with people about divorce, I talk about coming up with a good enough agreement. And this comes out of a psychological theory of the good enough mother. But the idea is, if each person feels a little stretched, you have the good enough agreement. Because this idea of fairness actually can poison things. But if everybody is really hearing each other and you feel you've given a little bit more and the other person feels the same, that's when you have a good agreement. It's good enough. And that's a concept that it's sometimes hard for people to hear because they want to win or they want more. Those attitudes are probably the most destructive way that things can proceed.
Gina, I did not know that you were a financial planner. Because
I've been learning.
I see. The concept of the good enough agreement also translates into other facets of a divorce, certainly when it comes to a child rearing and when it comes to money also, right? The reality is that in a divorce, there will be less money than in the marriage. And it will be hard for both parties to get everything that they want, right? And so there will be a need to compromise and a need to get to a position where it is good enough.
Sorry, Chris, for interrupting. I mean, Chris's point is clear that two separate households cannot live on the same money as one household. It is going to be a stretch, and it's going to be difficult in 95% of all divorce cases, unless you are very wealthy. So the question is, what's good enough? What is a compromise? And I guess it's only a compromise depending on what the problem is you're trying to solve. When two people in a family are going through a divorce, they have to think about what is the problem that we face. And we try to think of it not as a battle between two people or between two sides, but between two people, the spouses, against a common problem. The common problem is we don't have enough money to live on the way we did before. Or the common problem is our children are going to live in two households now instead of one, and we're going to have to manage that. You can have a great agreement that serves that problem, that answers those questions and focuses on that problem. It's not going to be the same as it used to be. That's for sure. But framing the problem and working together to solve it in a more global perspective is the way to take care of your family when you're going through divorce.
Yeah. So there is a question. I'm sorry. There's a question online there about from Kevin about what percentage of divorces are handled through a collaborative law process versus an attorney versus attorney battle. And has this increased significantly over the last 5 years? I'm not up on the statistics on that, right? But
So I'm not, I'm also a collaborative law trained attorney. Collaborative law has taken hold in different areas of the country at different rates. In Massachusetts, we have a very active collaborative law council and an active collaborative law bar. And they have recently started a program with reduced rates for people that want to use the collaborative law process, but don't feel they can afford all of the professionals. And I think it's called the Access to Justice Project of the Massachusetts Collaborative Law Council. And you
Just
can
access to collaboration.
access to collaboration. And you can find information about that on the mclc.org website.
yeah,
I will say
David, it's
that,
massclc.org.
thank you very much for
You're very
correcting that. Appreciate it, Chris. I will say that mediation has increased exponentially over the last 10 years and especially over the last 5 years. 10 years ago, very few people even knew what mediation was, and I had to explain that to people even what it was. Almost everyone now has heard of it and knows something substantial about it or knows someone that used it. I would say my practice is about 95% mediation cases these days. And that's a full-time, and that provides a full-time career. So that tells you that it's viable. I think about 30 or 40% of cases go through mediation now in that end up in divorce, something along those lines. Many more cases in the court system, although they may not go officially through mediation process or collaborative law, they use a court-based process called conciliation, which is with a neutral and is with a negotiator that helps people try to resolve the cases. So dispute resolution, other than a judge making a decision, is happening in probably 75 or 80% of all the cases in the system right now. And as I said earlier, only 5% of cases in court actually go to trial and get decided by a judge. So someone's talking at some point. Almost everyone is talking settlement at some point in the case.
I know when we were talking about the collaborative law and working with a team, my next question is really, what does someone do if they don't have a therapist or they've never worked with a financial planner or professional, and they might be interested in the collaborative law? What would somebody's first step be to establishing their team?
Gina, you want to go for that, or?
Okay, but you all add. I
Of
think
course.
I think what we've been learning over time, we originally, the most traditional route when somebody was thinking about divorce is that they might go seek an attorney. But now we're learning that someone can show up in my office who has worked on their relationship and decided, you know, it's not viable. And I would work with them to help them figure out which pathway made the most sense. And I can refer them to attorneys, or I can return them to a financial professional when they're trying to figure out, I don't even know what my finances are. I didn't know where to begin. So that's a piece. But places like the Mass Collaborative Law Council and the Mass Financial Association, and also Mass Council on Family Mediation, all of those websites have listings of members, and you can actually go on and read about those people and see if somebody feels like a good match to you. Many people offer consultations or will call and have an extended conversation with you on the phone. And as David mentioned, the Mass Collaborative Law Council has developed this process for access to collaboration, which you can also see if you can qualify for, again, by going to the Mass Collaborative Law website. And I think, you know, today you'll end up with all of our information too. If any of us can be helpful to you, you'll have our you know, information to contact us, and we can now be a resource to you as well.
Yeah, so I think these are good places to start, right? The various websites of the organizations, and I think you will find financial people on the massclc.org website, and you will also find them on website, which I think Shai shared a little bit earlier. Right. So I think one of the things that people should keep in mind is that we all have specialties. Right. It's for the same reason that you go to a divorce lawyer like David for divorce and not to an intellectual property lawyer, right, is because David specializes. And the same thing is true for financial planners. And so you would want to find someone who specializes in that kind of stuff so that you can get the best possible advice at the most economical, most economically. Right. And so FPAMA.org, I think, is a website. I think that's where you might start for financial people. You will find it on MassCLC, and you will want to find people who are specialists. And how do you do that, right? And so one of the shortcuts to do that is to find someone who has the CDFA designation, is a Certified Divorce Financial Analyst designation. And you can find those people on the institutedfa.com, and these would be people who have gone through a course and a certification for divorce. You would want then to verify that the people who do that have practiced what they have learned, that they spent a substantial amount of time in the practice of divorce financial planning. Right.
So I'd like to do really I'm trying to articulate several thoughts at the same time, which is never a good idea. So let me start with just one of them. When someone is starting out in their divorce process, what they need most is information and education. Chris and Gina mentioned some of the places to get that. The other place that I'm going to kind of make a pitch for is the Vesta organization. It's Vesta Redefining Divorce, vestadivorce.com, which is an organization that Chris and I belong to that provides educational programs for people going through divorce. The programs are free. The programs involve all the things we're talking about, emotional issues in divorce, legal issues in divorce, financial issues in divorce. The group will give you access to information and consults with CDFA, Certified Divorce Financial Analysts, lawyers, mediators, collaborative law professionals, therapists, divorce coaches, the whole thing. And those programs are free of charge. So that's a good place to get started with educating yourself. And the other place is the Mass Council for Family Mediation, has a terrific website as well. So start reading and learning and seeing what's out there, and try to connect with professionals that are in the industry. And you could take advantage of free consults. Most mediators and attorneys give free consultations, about half hour, but understand, when you do that, make sure you know that what part's free and what part's not. A really detailed consult might take an hour, but the lawyer may give you only a half hour free. So ask questions, ask a lot of questions, and get information from qualified people. I like to tell people that when they're going through divorce, they seem to get a lot of information from family members, from other people that have gone through divorce, from people they meet at a cocktail party or at a bar. And that's the worst place you can get information. You're not going to get information that is accurate and relevant for you in your situation. So I like to say, don't get advice at a bar, get advice from a member of the bar. Silly as that is.
David is raising such an important point for people to think about. Family members and friends, when you're going through these hard times, everybody wants to be supportive. Everybody has ideas about what you should do, and their hearts are often in the right place. But they can confuse you, mix you up, not understand this idea that we even talked about a good enough agreement. Somebody can say, no, you must fight to the end, and they're meaning to help you. So it is so important to get good professionals to help you find a pathway that will support you and not destroy the rest of your life.
Shai, can I give an example
Sure.
of where family is not helpful?
Sure.
So many times people come to me and they are struggling. They might be abused in their home, physically or emotionally. It just may be a place of high conflict, and their mental health is at risk if they stay. But they don't leave because someone tells them that if you leave the house, the marital home, that's abandonment, and you're going to be penalized. You're going to lose the divorce. Well, that's just not true. It's a myth. It is not abandonment to leave a home that is a miserable place to be and is unhealthy for you and your children or your family or both spouses. You can leave. The courts don't make you stay in a torture chamber. But family members, it's commonly believed because of what people see on TV or stories they hear, and they tell each other that abandonment is the problem. So that's why you need to get answers from qualified professionals and not from family members, even if they themselves have been through divorce.
I have a couple of questions that popped up in our Q&A box. One said, what is the average cost for divorce lawyers? Is this needed for all? Or would there be an option for low-income couples to not have a lawyer? Do you have any other recommendations?
Yeah, so I'd say the average cost, so lawyers charge by the hour for the most part. There are some that charge flat fee. The average cost of lawyers in the suburbs, outside of Boston, I'm going to say the range for is going to be somewhere between $275 an hour and $400 an hour. That's a general range. There are some a little lower, there are some a little higher. I will tell you that people at the higher end, if they're really experienced, can probably cost you less money because they're much more efficient at what they do despite their higher rate. In the city of Boston, if you go for a Boston law firm, then they have associates that may charge $350 an hour, $400 an hour, but the partners are going to be in the range of $450 to $750 an hour. There are some higher even. Lower income couples can get free or reduced fee legal services from various organizations that there are legal services organizations and different private nonprofits that also provide free or reduced fee legal services. And we can get a list of those and Shai can send that out afterwards. Some of the law schools also have legal clinics. I know that Suffolk Law School does, Harvard does, I believe Northeastern University does as well, where they provide free or reduced fee legal services as well. There's a great organization called Senior Partners for Justice, headed by Judge Ginsburg, which provides free or reduced fee legal services for people who need them as well. So there are resources, and if you have questions about that, Shai, maybe you can kind of find us a way that we can kind of direct people to those afterwards.
We can definitely include a resource list in that follow-up email. So everybody who's registered for today's webinar, if you haven't registered, you should go ahead and register. That way you can get all of these links and resources that will be coming to your mailbox tomorrow. The next question I have, do you include guardian ad litem or attorney for the children? Is that a part of the process?
It's
with
not,
collaborative law?
Gina, do you understand that?
I
Do
do
you know those
understand.
terms?
Yes, but maybe it's still a legal question. I mean,
Yeah. So I guess, so for the most part, so a guardian ad litem is a person appointed by a court to investigate issues relating, usually it's relating to child custody, parenting time, or other child-related issues that are in contest. Typically, you're not going to see a guardian ad litem in a collaborative law case. It's not that it's impossible. The same is true as for attorneys for the court. The court system over the last 4 or 5 years, I believe, started a program called ARC, Attorneys Representing Children, where the court will appoint a volunteer attorney in a contested parenting plan or custody case to represent the interests of the child or children. And that person is an advocate for the child in the court process. We don't see that in collaborative law cases or mediation. But if there is a complicated parenting issue or custody issue, it can be mediated and it can be handled in collaborative law. And often an outside professional will be brought in as a neutral evaluator or an advocate or a parenting coach. There is a profession called parenting coaches, and they can work with both parents to help people overcome their conflict in their child raising. There's another profession called parenting coordinator that can be brought in a collaborative law case or a mediated case. And that is a person appointed, they have to be appointed by the court in the end, but that is a person who will make decisions about the children if the parents cannot agree. But their parenting coordinator's first role is to try to reach agreement. And just as one example, we had one case involving a parenting coordination that my partner did where the parents couldn't agree to which school system to send the child to. And the parenting coordinator, believe it or not, was appointed to help make that decision. A guardian ad litem might also be appointed to investigate and present to a judge what the best outcome should be, and then it would be the judge's decision. But parenting coordinators can be imbued with that type of authority as well.
Right, and it's not to say that the people that do collaborative law have to get along so well with each other. Oftentimes, there are very complicated families that use collaborative law, but sometimes there is one arena which is something called parental alienation. If one parent is turning the child or trying to turn the child against the other parent, there are therapists that are particularly trained to work with those children and those families. And it really requires both a kind of skill and also a comfort level to work with those people. And again, these different groups can also make those referrals too, but that would be a very specialized mental health professional, not a generic mental health professional who might not have the skill sets to address those extremely complicated situations.
I have one other question in my list of questions, and then we can take some more questions from our live audience. I guess, can we talk a little bit, I guess this is more for Chris, can we talk a little bit more about the financial impact that a divorce can have during or after the process is complete? Because we know that there's a cost associated going into a divorce, but what are some other things that may not be as well known as far as financial implications?
It's a toughie. So, so I think we've mentioned before already that spending is going to be an issue, right? Because if you are going to have the same income jointly after the divorce and you had before the divorce, clearly there is going to be a problem because you're going to have more spending, or you're going to need 2 homes instead of 1 home. And you're going to need a lot more things like that, right? So there will be additional expenses. The income is not going to increase, and oftentimes it decreases. And so you'll have to deal with that. And obviously divorce is, in of itself, is expensive. We've talked about the cost here. David mentioned some of the costs of the lawyers in town, and obviously the cost for people like Gina or myself exist also. So the other things that you want to know about, right, is the costs that are inherent in the divorce itself. So when you're separating, when you're dividing, for instance, an asset, right? Is it going to be, is 100 divided by 2 equal to 50, basically? And the thing is that it isn't always. There is a lot of subtleties in many assets, like the home, the retirement assets, the options that some people may have, right? That mean that if you just make a decision without understanding the subtleties of the asset, you might end up with less than you would otherwise have. Right. And specifically what I mean there is, as an example, is a retirement asset. So if you have a retirement plan that has, say, $100,000 in it, and is that the same thing as $100,000 in cash? And the answer is no, it isn't. And the reason for that is that for most retirement plans, there is a tax that is not paid in there. When we have contributed to the retirement plan, it resulted in reducing our taxable income. And so now that we're talking about distributing the retirement plan, then it results in a tax, in an income tax. So therefore, $100,000 in a retirement plan is not the same thing as $100,000. And that is just one example. There are a lot of other small issues like that across the spectrum of the assets.
So Chris, so I think just to clarify, $100,000 in a retirement account, once the taxes are taken out, it might only be worth $80,000, something in that range, if someone has an overall tax rate of 20%. So you're comparing, so if someone with a $100,000 retirement account keeps that, and the other person gets $100,000 in cash, then the person with the retirement account is actually getting substantially less.
That's exactly right.
Well, and even more complicated that becomes psychological are things like the house. A house can be appraised for a certain value, but then what happens when the roof goes or the heating system goes or something changes in terms of the neighborhood not being the same worth as when it was divided. And so sometimes we really have to work with people to walk around, what does it mean to stay in the home? And is that going to really serve you? And it's very painful, but it's having people like David and Chris that work together with me with the psychological piece of this to help people see their choices and fully understand them before they move ahead, because it doesn't fit so neatly into any one of our boxes in terms of being able to advise the clients or to help them think through their choices. And it is their choices at the end of the day, but how important it is to understand what you're choosing.
One of the big issues in almost every divorce case involves keeping the home. And very often one person is very attached to it. And it may be because of a personal emotional investment in the home, or they may feel that it's really important for the children to stay there. But as a responsible attorney and financial professional, we have to advise our client and teach our client that there are real expenses that are associated with keeping that property that have to be considered and that are going to have an impact. Very often people who are very emotionally attached to a house find out a year later that they can't afford it, or that or it's sucking, they need so many repairs, or it's so hard to maintain. Even mowing the lawn and shoveling the snow and taking care of it is draining. It's a time suck. And so, as a team, Gina, Chris and I are going to try to have our clients really understand the implications of an emotional based decision and whether that decision is going to really feel like it was the right one a year or two down the road. It's really, so that's why it's important to have a team of multidisciplinary professionals.
Definitely. And you can see through the conversation how many different things that you really have to be thinking about when you are considering a divorce or going through the process. There's so many layers, and I think it's very important to reinforce the idea of having a team and using all the resources that you have access to. So if our folks that are listening, we did drop a bunch of those links that we mentioned today in our chats. We are actually wrapping up here. It's 12:55. We have about 5 more minutes. If attendees would like to ask any questions, now's the time to drop that in the Q&A box. Otherwise, we'll be wrapping up. Do you guys have any last minute thoughts or tips you want folks to walk away with?
I did see 2 more questions, Santia, so I didn't know.
These are more specific, so I didn't know
Okay.
if you wanted to, we can ask them. So one is, if I ended up with the house, can I ask for more money to fix items that were neglected during the marriage and or even items that have been broken during the separation? Also, who pays for the removing and cleaning up of the house if it does go on the market?
So usually, yes, you can ask for anything when you are negotiating. If a house, but remember this, if a house is in bad condition, the value of it is going to be lower than it would be if it was in good condition, which means that, if the house is in bad condition, it might be worth, $250,000 instead of $350,000. And therefore your spouse you might keep the house valued at $250,000 and your spouse may keep something else worth $250,000, not $350,000. So kind of the cost of the future repairs are almost built into valuing the assets and dividing them. You absolutely can ask and try to negotiate for some additional money to upgrade a house, especially if your children are going to be staying there. They need a healthy, safe home, and that's really important. I think that's a strong advocacy or negotiating point. If the house is going to be sold, normally both people share the costs of the upgrade. That's most often what happens. There are different ways of doing it, but that's the short answer.
Thank you. And then our last question right now in the chat, it says, thank you for breaking down this process so well. I needed a divorce a week after my marriage, but it wasn't until 2016, after 38 years, I was able to walk away from it. Now I need to get that divorce, but I find myself going through various conflicts. First, just the thought of starting the process makes me nauseous. And from what I learned in the mass.gov website, I would not be able to claim child support or alimony because he's in another state. So I would still be dependent on the system even after I get divorced, and I have a child with severe disabilities. So I need to know what are my options, because there is really no financial agreement needed other than child support and alimony, at least until I complete school.
So it's not correct that child support, that if someone lives in another state, you cannot get child support or alimony. It doesn't matter where the other person lives in terms of your ability to get support if it's a Massachusetts divorce. So in almost every state has provision for child support, and they enforce each other's provisions. Almost every state, I believe every state also has provisions for alimony. The alimony will end. Different states have different restrictions and limitations on when alimony is paid, for how long and how much. But if yours is a Massachusetts divorce, which it very well may be, then it would follow the Massachusetts rules. So I'd say to this question, you need to get some good answers. You have a complicated situation. You should try to get some consults with professionals and get some answers from in person as much as you possibly can.
And that brings us to our last 60 seconds. Thank you all for joining us for this talk. It's been incredibly informative. Again, there are links in the chat. You can click on them from the chat, copy and paste them from the chat. Otherwise, they'll be coming to you in a follow-up email. And again, do you guys have any last minute tips or anything before we go?
Just that wherever you are in your life, remember you have options and choices, and allow yourself to reach out to professionals to get information so you can make informed decisions, but never feel you're stuck and that you can't move ahead in some useful way. I think that helps you wherever you are.
Chris, did you have one?
Let me think of one. You go first.
All right, I have one. And here it is. Whatever professionals you decide to work with, especially on the legal side, make sure that professional is someone that you can talk to, that you understand what they're telling you. And if you don't understand something, that they're willing to explain it to you. This is your life and your case. And you have a right to go through it with knowledge and with compassion, with professionals that have compassion.
Right. Yeah, the only thing I would add here is that life on the other side of divorce is actually pretty okay, right? Is that there is recovery and life continues on.
Thank you all so much for joining us again. Thank you everybody who attended. Again, that email will be going out tomorrow with all of your links and resources and how to contact any one of our panelists from today, the Office of Economic Empowerment. Thanks you for joining us and have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Shai. Appreciate it very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye now.